Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are tackling a subject that, it feels almost synonymous with a certain era of American excess.
Oh, absolutely.
If I say the wolf, you immediately have an image in your head.
Yeah. Leonardo DiCaprio.
You're picturing Leonardo DiCaprio, you're picturing a white Lamborghini Countach, you're picturing, lobsters being thrown at FBI agents on a yacht. You are thinking of the movie.
Which is completely understandable. That Scorsese film was a massive cultural phenomenon. It really did. It turned a financial criminal into a kind of rock star.
Exactly. And that is precisely why we're here today. We're going to push that Hollywood glamour aside.
We have to.
We are stripping away the cinematic lens to look at the actual source material regarding Jordan Belfort. And we have a massive stack of notes here. Comprehensive biographical accounts, actual court documents regarding restitution, reports on his post-prison ventures, and, the nitty-gritty mechanics of how his schemes actually worked.
The mission here is really specific, I think. We aren't here to retell the party stories. We want to understand the mechanics.
Right.
How does a dental school dropout become one of Wall Street's most notorious figures?
Oh.
And maybe more importantly, after losing absolutely everything, his freedom, his money, his family, how does he manage to sell himself back to the public?
That is the big question.
Yeah.
It really is. Is this a genuine redemption arc, or is it just the ultimate sales pitch?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to trace the rise, the reality of the fall, and the specific details of the restitution and reinvention that often get overlooked. Because when you actually look at the documents, the story is much more complex and, frankly, a lot more cynical than the movie suggests.
And we have to start by just acknowledging the source of our perception, right? Most of what people know comes from his memoirs, The Wolf of Wall Street and Catching the Wolf of Wall Street.
So his version.
His version, exactly. But as we go through this, we have to weigh his narrative against the legal reality. The source material paints a picture of a man who is, above all else, a cyclical creature. He builds, he scales, he crashes, and then he pivots.
So let's unpack this. Let's go right back to the beginning. Before the Ferraris, before the Quaaludes, we're talking about Jordan Ross Belfort, born 1962.
Raised in Bayside, Queens.
Right. And here is the first nugget from the file that I think just sets the stage perfectly. His parents, Max and Leah, were both accountants.
Which is fascinating context, isn't it? Think about that environment.
Yeah.
He grew up in a household where numbers were the language. You have this Jewish upbringing in Queens in the 60s and 70s, parents who understand the ledger, who understand profit and loss, liabilities and assets. You have to wonder how much of that financial literacy was just osmosis.
Totally.
He wasn't learning this from the street. He was probably learning it at the dinner table.
And clearly, the entrepreneurial itch started early. I love this story from the source material, but I also want to scrutinize it a bit.
Okay.
So between high school and college, Belfort and a childhood friend, Elliot Lowenstern, they decide they're going to hustle. They head out to Jones Beach.
A classic New York summer spot.
A classic. And they aren't just hanging out. They are selling scooped Italian ice from styrofoam coolers. Now, the source says they made $20,000.
In a single summer.
Okay, let's just pause and do the math on that, because that number sounds insane for a couple of teenagers.
It does.
We are talking about the early 1980s. Adjusted for inflation, that 20 grand back then is roughly equivalent to nearly $75,000 today.
That is a staggering amount of cash for two kids on a beach.
Right. When I was a teenager, a summer job meant making minimum wage bagging groceries.
Yeah.
Maybe you walk away with a couple grand if you're lucky. These two walked away with the equivalent of a mid-level corporate salary. How is that even physically possible?
I know. Were they selling the ice for $50 a scoop?
What was going on?
It's a volume game, and it's a territory game. If we really analyze this, it's the first real sign of his sales DNA. It implies a few things. One, they weren't just selling a product, they were exploiting a captive market.
Okay.
You have hot people on a beach, dehydrated, looking for sugar. The demand is, it's inelastic. Two, to move that much product, we're talking thousands and thousands of scoops, requires serious logistics.
I hadn't even thought that part.
You have to keep the ice frozen in styrofoam coolers in the baking sun. You have to transport it. You have to hustle up and down the sand.
It establishes that he wasn't afraid of the grind.
Not at all.
Carrying styrofoam coolers up and down Jones Beach isn't glamorous work. It's heavy, it's messy, but the margin was clearly there.
Exactly. And it highlights his ability to spot a gap. It wasn't about the Italian ice itself. He didn't care about the culinary quality of it.
No.
It was about the arbitrage. Buy low, sell high, high volume. That is the blueprint for everything that comes later.
So he has this pile of cash, this small fortune for a kid his age. And he heads to American University, gets a degree in biology, believe it or not.
Which is a surprise to a lot of people who just assume he studied finance or economics or something.
Right. But then comes the pivot that changes everything. He takes that Italian ice money, and he enrolls in the University of Maryland School of Dentistry.
He had a plan.
He did. But this is where the story takes a really sharp left turn. And I want to get your take on whether this sounds like a true story or a Wolf embellishment.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's day one at dental school. The dean gives the welcoming speech to the incoming class. And he says, and I'm quoting the source here, "The golden age of dentistry is over. If you're here simply because you're looking to make a lot of money, you're in the wrong place."
That is the legendary quote.
Belfort hears this and he drops out. Immediately.
It's a very cinematic moment, isn't it?
It feels almost too perfect.
Yeah.
I walked out the door right then and there. Do we buy that? Did it happen exactly like that?
Well, whether it happened that dramatically or whether it took him a week to process it, the outcome is the verified fact.
True.
He did drop out almost immediately. And I think even if he polished the anecdote for the book, the psychology behind it is real.
How so?
Most people go to dental school because they want to be dentists or they want the prestige or they have some desire to help people. For Belfort, the career was purely a vehicle. It was a vehicle for a financial outcome.
Right. It was just a means to an end.
Once the dean removed the promise of making a lot of money, the vehicle was useless to him. It's like buying a car to win a race and then finding out the car has no engine. You don't just sit in it, you get out.
It crystallizes his motivation perfectly. It wasn't about the work. It was about the wealth. So, dentistry is out. What does he do next?
He goes into sales.
Specifically, door-to-door meat and seafood on Long Island.
This is the first legitimate adult business venture we see in the records. And again, look at the pattern. He creates a business called the Meat and Seafood Business.
Not a very creative name.
No, but descriptive.
And he doesn't just sell a few steaks to housewives here and there. He scales it.
He scales it aggressively.
He claims he grew this business to employ several workers. They were moving 5,000 pounds of beef and fish a week.
Let's just contextualize 5,000 pounds.
Please.
That is 2.5 tons of perishable product weekly. In the 1980s, this isn't clicking a button on an app to order more inventory.
No.
This is physical inventory. You need trucks, you need freezers, you need drivers.
And you need to sell it before it spoils.
Precisely. It is a high-pressure logistical nightmare, and he's doing this door to door.
But here's the foreshadowing. He scales it up, moving massive volume, and then it collapses.
Poof.
He files for bankruptcy at age 25. Why do you think that happened? What went wrong?
Well, looking at the retrospective analysis, it really suggests a focus on aggressive expansion, sales, without the underlying capital structure to support it.
So selling faster than he could actually manage.
Exactly. He was likely extending credit to customers or buying inventory on credit that he couldn't pay back fast enough. It establishes this boom and bust cycle, rapid scaling followed by a total crash.
And he was 25 years old and already bankrupt.
That could have been the end of the story for a lot of people.
It's a humiliating failure. You're back at square one. But for Belfort, it seems like it was just the warm-up.
Uh-huh.
So he's broke, he's 25. A family friend pulls some strings and gets him a trainee job at LF Rothschild, a real, blue-blooded Wall Street firm.
Finally, he is in the arena.
But talk about bad timing. He gets there, he starts trading, he's ready to become a master of the universe, and then wham, Black Monday.
The stock market crash of 1987.
Right. October 19, 1987.
Yeah.
The biggest one-day percentage drop in stock market history.
The Dow dropped 22.6%.
It was just chaos.
It was. And LF Rothschild was hit hard. I mean, really hard. They started laying people off left and right.
And Belfort.
Being the low man on the totem pole was laid off almost immediately.
So the universe is really testing him here. Dentistry? No. Meat business. Bankrupt. Wall Street. The market literally crashes the moment he arrives.
But this is the crucial pivot point. This is where the wolf is actually born.
How so?
Because he can't play in the big leagues anymore. The big leagues are bleeding. LF Rothschild isn't hiring. Goldman isn't hiring. So he looks at the underbelly. He finds a job at a small brokerage center on Long Island selling penny stocks.
And this leads to the founding of Stratton Oakmont. Now, originally this was a franchise of something called Stratton Securities, right? It wasn't his name to start.
Correct. He started as a franchisee, which is an interesting detail. He didn't invent the name immediately, but eventually he buys out the original founder and makes it his own. And this is where we need to explain what Stratton Oakmont actually was.
Yes.
Because in the movie, it just looks like a chaotic party where people are screaming into phones. But structurally, it was a boiler room.
Let's break that down for the listener who might hear that term but not know the mechanics. What is a boiler room specifically?
A boiler room is basically an outbound call center that sells questionable investments using high-pressure sales tactics.
Okay.
They are literally turning up the heat on the investor. The term refers to the high-pressure environment and often the physical location. Originally, these scams were run out of cheap basement offices, near the boiler room of a building.
And Stratton Oakmont specialized in marketing penny stocks.
Right. Penny stocks are shares of very small public companies that trade at very low prices, usually under $5 a share. They're highly volatile, thinly traded, and very easy to manipulate because there isn't much public information about them.
And the specific fraud they were running is known as pump and dump. I want to walk through this step by step so we understand exactly how the theft happened.
Okay, let's look at the mechanism described in the text. It starts with the setup. Belfort and his partners, Stratton Oakmont, would acquire a huge position in a cheap stock. Sometimes they would control nearly the entire supply of the stock through what are called nominee accounts, or rat holes.
Rat holes, that sounds pleasant.
It means they own the stock, but it's hidden in accounts under other people's names, so it doesn't look like Stratton Oakmont owns it all.
Got it.
That's step one. Step two is the pump. Belfort's army of brokers gets on the phones.
And they had a very specific script for this, didn't they? I read about the Kodak pitch.
This is the genius and the evil of the sales tactic. They wouldn't start by selling the garbage stock.
Yeah.
They would call a potential client, often a blue-collar guy or a small business owner, and pitch a blue-chip stock. Something safe, like Kodak or IBM or Disney. Mr. Smith, Kodak is poised for a breakout.
Why do that? Why sell a legitimate stock first?
To build trust. It's brilliant in a sinister way. If you buy Kodak and it goes up a few bucks, you think, hey, this broker knows his stuff. You trust him. You think he's on your side. Belfort called this papering the client.
So once the client is papered and trusts the broker, then comes the switch.
Exactly. Then comes the call for the house stock. The garbage penny stock that Stratton Oakmont secretly owns. The broker calls back, breathless with excitement. Mr. Smith, I have something incredible. It's a small company. It's about to explode, but you have to move now.
That urgency, the scarcity.
It's classic psychological manipulation. The client, who now trusts the broker, dumps his savings into this penny stock.
And that's the pump.
The price of the stock skyrockets because of this artificial demand created by the call center.
And then
comes the dump. Once the price hits a peak, Stratton Oakmont and Belfort personally sell off their hidden holdings. They dump millions of shares into the market.
which kills the price.
It obliterates it. The supply floods the market, the price crashes to zero. Belfort walks away with millions in cash. The investors, Mr. Smith in Ohio, the retiree in Florida, are left holding stock that is literally worthless.
They lose everything.
It's a direct transfer of wealth from the gullible to the manipulator.
Correct. And the scale of this was unbelievable. The source says at one point, Stratton Oakmont employed over 1,000 stockbrokers.
1,000 brokers. Imagine the noise in that room. Imagine the energy required to keep 1,000 people lying on the phone all day.
And they were involved in stock issues totaling over $1 billion.
$1 billion with a B.
Including, famously, the IPO for Steve Madden footwear.
That was their crown jewel. Steve Madden was a legitimate company. They actually made shoes. Taking them public gave Stratton Oakmont a veneer of credibility.
Right.
Look, we aren't just selling penny stocks. We took Steve Madden public. But even that IPO was manipulated behind the scenes to ensure Belfort and his cronies controlled the share price from the jump.
Now we have to talk about the culture that fueled this. Because you can't have 1,000 young men ripping people off all day without a certain atmosphere.
Oh, yeah.
The source material describes a life of lavish parties and intensive use of recreational drugs.
Specifically methaqualone, quaaludes.
The source mentions his addiction to quaaludes explicitly.
And this is where the movie leans in heavily, but from an analytical perspective, we have to look at what that drug does. Quaaludes are a sedative hypnotic. They lower inhibitions. They make you feel invincible.
They numb the moral center? Is that a fair way to put it?
In a way, yes. When you are operating a billion-dollar fraud while addicted to heavy sedatives, your risk assessment is completely broken.
Yeah.
You stop worrying about the SEC, you stop worrying about the FBI, you feel like a god. That drug-fueled invincibility likely accelerated the fraud. It pushed them to be more brazen, more reckless.
So you have this boiler room, you have 1,000 brokers, you have drugs, you have money pouring in, but you also have eyes on you. The government isn't blind.
The regulatory cat-and-mouse game had to begin.
The source says Stratton Oakmont was under near constant scrutiny from the NSD, which is now Fine RA, from 1989 onward.
Okay.
That is almost the entire existence of the firm.
It was. They were fighting regulators constantly. Belfort spent a fortune on lawyers to delay, to obfuscate, to pay fines, and just keep going. But the wheels finally fell off in December 1996. The NASD expelled Stratton Oakmont. They effectively put the firm out of business.
But the criminal charges took a bit longer. It wasn't until 1999 that Belfort was indicted for securities fraud and money laundering.
And this leads to the next major pivot in his life, the pivot from wolf to rat, if you want to use the street terminology.
Well, because in the movies, not just the Belfort movie, but crime movies in general, there's this code of silence, Omerta. You don't snitch. You do your time.
That is not what happened here.
Not at all.
Not at all. The source material is very clear. Jordan Belfort became an FBI informant.
He didn't just talk. He wore a wire.
He wore a wire against his partners and associates. He gathered evidence. He testified against them.
I just want to pause on the reality of that for a second. Wearing a wire isn't simple. You are walking into a room with your best friends, people you have partied with, done drugs with, committed crimes with, and you are actively recording them to send them to prison.
It's a profound betrayal, but it's a rational calculation.
How so?
Belfort is a salesman. He deals in transactions. The deal on the table from the FBI was, you are looking at 20 or 30 years in prison.
Yeah.
Give us everyone else, and we will give you a discount.
And he took the deal.
He did the math. He realized his friends were a depreciating asset, and his freedom was the only thing that mattered. He sold out his friends to buy his freedom.
And the discount was significant. Let's look at the sentence. He was sentenced to 4 years.
Which, for a fraud of this magnitude, investor losses estimated at $200 million is remarkably light.
It's nothing.
There are people serving longer sentences for selling small amounts of marijuana.
But he didn't even serve the 4 years.
No, he served 22 months.
22 months. He did less than 2 years for a $200 million fraud.
At the Taft Correctional Institution in California.
And let's be clear about Taft. This isn't Rikers Island.
No, it's often referred to as Club Fed. It's a low-security camp, no bars on the windows, dorm-style living. But still, it is a loss of freedom.
And this is where the story gets really weird. Because you think, okay, he's in prison, he's disgraced, the party is over. But even in prison, the universe throws him a lifeline. Or rather, a cellmate.
This is one of those facts that if you wrote it in a screenplay, a producer would tell you to cut it because it's too unbelievable.
Right.
His cellmate was Tommy Chong.
As in Cheech and Chong, the guy from Up in Smoke.
The stoner comedy icon. Chong was in there for a paraphernalia charge selling bongs online, essentially, which was a huge controversy at the time.
So you have the Wolf of Wall Street and Tommy Chong sharing a bunk in California.
And they're swapping stories.
I'd love to have been a fly on that wall.
Exactly. Belfort is telling these wild tales about the midget tossing, the yacht sinking, the drugs, and Chong is just listening.
And Chong is the one who says, hey, you should write this down.
Chong told him, this is a book. You are a natural storyteller. You need to write your memoirs. Chong basically coached him into his next career.
So Belfort starts writing. The source says he actually wrote and destroyed 130 pages at first, a false start. He tried to write it like a novel, and it was bad. But eventually, he finds his voice. He produces The Wolf of Wall Street and Catching the Wolf of Wall Street.
And the commercial instinct kicks in again. These books were published in roughly 40 countries, translated into 18 languages.
And here's the kicker. A bidding war for the film rights began before the first book was even released.
He hadn't even published the book yet, and Hollywood was already throwing money at him.
Wow.
It just shows the undeniable appeal of the story. Studios and new audiences would eat up this tale of debauchery.
But we have to pause here and look at the fact versus fiction aspect. Because Belfort is the narrator of his own life. And he has a history of, let's call it, creative truth.
He is a notoriously unreliable narrator. The former federal prosecutor who led the investigation is quoted in our source material. He said that Belfort invented much and aggrandized his importance.
Aggrandized his importance. The man who calls himself the wolf. I'm shocked.
Chuckles. Right.
But the prosecutor's point is crucial. He emphasized that the real story isn't just the parties and the fun. It involves thousands of victims who lost their savings.
Yeah.
When we get swept up in the narrative of the wolf, we forget the sheep, the people who got slaughtered financially. The book makes it funny. The reality was tragic for the victims.
That is a perfect segue into the money trail, because part of his sentence wasn't just time, it was restitution. He was ordered to pay back $110.4 million to his victims.
Correct. That was the legal debt.
So let's look at the scorecard. As of 2013, which is years after his release, how much had the victims recovered? About $10 million.
Out of $110 million, that is less than 10%.
And most of that $10 million didn't come from Belfort writing checks. It came from the sale of forfeited properties, houses, cars that the government seized early on. It wasn't coming from his new income.
This brings us to the 50% dispute. This is a legal battle that really highlights how Belfort operates. I want to dive into the legalese here because it shows his mindset.
It does. So his original sentencing agreement stated he had to pay 50% of his gross income toward restitution. That sounds like a lot, right? Half of everything you make goes to the victims.
Right. If you make $1 million, the victims get $500,000. Seems fair.
But in 2013, federal prosecutors filed a complaint saying he was in default. They claimed he wasn't paying.
And Belfort's lawyers had a very technical argument.
A very technical argument. They argued that the 50% requirement was only valid during his parole. Technically, it's called supervised release.
Oh.
His supervised release ended in 2009. Therefore, his lawyers argued, once that supervision period ended, the contractual obligation to pay 50% evaporated.
That is bold. I'm off parole, so I don't have to give you half my money anymore, even though I still owe $100 million.
It's legalistic jujitsu, and the judge agreed, or at least ruled that the specific 50% requirement had expired with the supervision, so they had to strike a new deal.
What was the new deal?
He has to pay a minimum of $10,000 per month for life.
$10,000 a month.
Now, for the average listener, $10,000 a month is a huge amount of money.
Sure.
But for a guy who claims to make millions in speaking fees, it's a drop in the bucket. Let's do the math. $10,000 a month is $120,000 a year. To pay off the remaining $100 million,
Oh boy.
it would take roughly 833 years.
So the victims are never getting that money back.
Mathematically, no.
Yeah.
Unless he voluntarily writes a check for $100 million, the victims are out of luck.
And there was also a controversy regarding the movie royalties, right? I remember seeing him claim he was giving all the money to the victims. He went on TV and said it.
He did claim that. On his website, on Facebook, in interviews, he said, "I am not making a dime from the movie or the books. I am turning over 100% of the royalties to the victims."
That sounds noble. That sounds like redemption.
It does. But the U.S. attorney stepped in and filed documents saying that claim was not factual. They pointed out that he had received money from the initial sale of the film rights and kept it.
Business Week had a report on this that was pretty damning.
Yes, they reported that before the movie release, out of roughly $1.2 million he received, he had paid only $21,000 toward restitution.
$21,000 out of $1.2 million. That's not even 50%. That's not even 2%.
So there is a massive gap between the redemption brand, the guy who says, "I'm giving it all back," and the financial reality. He was keeping the vast majority of the cash while telling the public he was a martyr for his victims.
That gap brings us to his current career. Reinvention. He didn't go hide in a hole. He didn't retire quietly. He pivoted to motivational speaking and sales training.
He became a guru.
And markets it as Jordan Belfort's straight-line sales psychology.
Which is incredibly ironic if you think about it. He is teaching the straight line system.
Is that a new system? Did he invent this post-prison?
No, that is the exact same sales technique he developed at Stratton Oakmont. It is the system he used to train those 1,000 brokers to defraud people. He has repackaged the weapon of the crime as a legitimate business tool.
And people are paying for it.
They're paying a lot. His speaking fees range from $30,000 to $75,000 per engagement. His sales seminars can cost $80,000 or more for corporate training.
Who is paying that? Who hires a convicted fraudster to train their sales team?
That is the fascinating market question. It's a mix. You have aspiring entrepreneurs who see his wealth and want the secret. You have legitimate companies who think, well, say what you want about his ethics. The guy knows how to close a deal.
They want the technique without the jail time.
They think they can strip mine the skill and leave the fraud behind.
It's dangerous territory.
It is. Because the technique itself, the high pressure, the psychological manipulation, is inherently aggressive.
And speaking of dangerous territory, the source mentions a scandal in Australia that sounds suspiciously familiar. This is something that often gets buried under the movie hype.
This is a really important detail, the Australian training scandal.
Tell me about this. What happened down under?
So, an investigation by 7 News and the Sunday Mail in Australia found links between Belfort and a company called Face-to-Face Training and another called Career Pathways Australia.
Yeah.
Belfort gave workshops for the staff of these companies. He was the brand ambassador. He promoted them heavily.
And what was the business model of these companies?
They were vocational training companies. In Australia, the government provides funding for worker training.
Government money.
Yeah.
Always a target.
Right. So face-to-face training was receiving millions in state government funding to train employees. But the investigation alleged that the training never happened.
A ghost training program.
9 News Australia called it a tick and flick scam.
Tick and flick. What does that mean?
You tick the box to say someone was trained, you flick the paperwork to the government, and you collect the check. The employees never got the training, but the company got the funding.
And Belfort was involved with them.
He was the face of their workshops. He was training the people who were running this scheme. Now, to be fair, the source doesn't say Belfort was the architect or the owner of that specific scam.
Okay, so he wasn't charged with anything.
No, he wasn't charged, but he was in the orbit of it. He was a paid associate of a company accused of a multi-million-dollar fraud against the government.
Isn't that pattern again?
Exactly. He finds himself adjacent to or directly involved in situations where value is being faked and money is being extracted from a large, faceless entity. First it was investors, then it was the Australian government.
It's like he has a magnet for it. Or maybe he is the magnet. It suggests that even in his legitimate phase, he attracts operators who cut corners.
Precisely. Birds of a feather.
Let's shift gears to his modern moves. Because a guy like Belfort has to stay on the cutting edge of money. What is the cutting edge right now?
Crypto. Of course.
Of course. And his journey with cryptocurrency is classic Belfort.
A flip-flop.
A total 180. Originally, back around 2017, he was a massive skeptic. He called Bitcoin frickin' insanity and mass delusion. He was on TV telling people to get out before they lost everything.
I remember that. He was warning people away from it. He sounded like the voice of reason for a minute.
But then prices skyrocketed. The market cap hit trillions. And suddenly the wolf changed his tune. Now he is an investor in crypto startups. He has pivoted to being a crypto bull.
Why the change? Did he suddenly understand the technology better?
Cynically, I think he saw where the money was.
Yeah. Belfort chases liquidity. When the money was in meat, he sold meat. When it was in penny stocks, he sold stocks. Now the money is in crypto, so he sells crypto wisdom.
But the blockchain bit him back.
It did. In 2021, a hacker stole $300,000 in digital tokens from his crypto wallet.
There is a certain irony in the wolf getting robbed.
There is. He was very vocal about it, very angry, but it shows that even the master can get played in this new Wild West.
I also want to touch on the yacht incident.
Yeah.
Because the sinking of the Nadine is such a perfect metaphor for his hubris. The source gives us some specific details on this that are just wild.
Yes. The yacht, the Nadine, and you know who it was originally built for?
No.
Coco Chanel.
Get out. I did not know that. That's a piece of genuine history.
It was a beautiful, historic vessel, and Jordan Belfort sank it.
Ow.
Ego. Pure ego. He insisted on sailing into high winds off the coast of Sardinia. The captain, the expert, the guy who actually knows how to sail, advised him against it, said it was dangerous, said the wingers were too high.
And Belfort?
Belfort overruled him. He essentially said, I'm the wolf. I control the weather.
Full steam ahead.
And nature didn't care about his ego. The waves smashed the foredeck hatch. The yacht took on water and sank. It's at the bottom of the Mediterranean.
And everyone on board.
They all had to be rescued by Italian Navy Special Forces.
It's the Stratton Oakmont story in miniature. Ignore the rules, ignore the experts, push full throttle until the whole thing goes under.
And assume someone will come rescue you. Which, in both cases, they sort of did. He survived the yacht sinking, and he survived the prison sentence. He always seems to have a life raft.
Let's touch briefly on his politics before we wrap up, because for a guy who lives such a chaotic life, his political views are interesting.
They are a mix. In the 90s, he donated to the Republican Party, $100,000.
Okay, straightforward enough.
But socially, he describes himself as a liberal at heart. He's pro-choice, things like that. He's not a staunch conservative on social issues.
But he voted for Trump in 2016.
He did. He said he agreed with the policies on government size and immigration. But he also later criticized Trump's rhetoric, calling it divisive. So he's not a blind loyalist, but he leans right on economics.
And he had some strong words for the Democrats in 2020.
Right. He criticized Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren specifically. He said their financial policies would destroy the fabric of the country.
Which, coming from a man who defrauded investors of $200 million.
Is a bold statement on what destroys the fabric of a country.
Exactly. Don't listen to Bernie. He'll ruin the economy. Now let me tell you about this penny stock that will make you rich.
It highlights his worldview. He believes in the unchecked market. He believes that regulation is the enemy of opportunity, even though regulation is the only thing that eventually stops him from robbing more people. He views himself as a capitalist hero, not a villain.
So we've traced the arc. We've gone from the styrofoam coolers on Jones Beach to the boiler room. We've been in the cell with Tommy Chong. We've seen the lawsuits, the payouts, or lack thereof, and the reinvented guru on stage.
It is a heck of a journey.
So what does this all mean? Why are we so fascinated by him? Why did we just spend an hour dissecting his life?
I think it's because Jordan Belfort represents a very specific American conflict. On one hand, we value the hustle. We love the story of the kid from Queens who makes 20 grand selling Italian ice. We admire the salesmanship, the ability to generate wealth from thin air.
We want to believe that we could do it too.
We want to believe in the magic trick. We want to believe there is a shortcut.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we despise the fraud. We hate the idea of the little guy getting ripped off. Belfort forces us to ask, where is the line? At what point does sales become scam?
And are we complicit because we buy the ticket to the movie?
Yeah.
Are we cheering for the bad guy because he's charming?
It's the magnetism of the villain and the reality of forgiveness.
Mm.
Society has, for the most part, forgiven him. He is a celebrity. He is rich again. We have rewarded the reinvention.
Which brings me to the final thought. The source mentions that Belfort's greatest regret is losing people's money. He says that in interviews. I regret it.
He says the words.
But actions speak louder. He fought the government tooth and nail to stop paying 50% of his income to his victims. He found the legal loophole. He kept the movie money. So it raises the question, has the wolf actually changed his stripes? Or did he just find a legal way to hunt?
I think the sheep should probably keep watching their backs.
That's a wrap for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye.